He's also a big Munster rugby fan. I'm delighted to welcome Hilary Murphy to the You and Your Business studio. Hiya, Hilary.
Hi, how are you, Alec?
I'm fantastic, Hilary. I'm great. Of course, I'm freezing my ass off here in Dublin, but I hope the weather's a bit more kind to you down there.
Well, it's the sunny southeast, so
well, I'm glad somebody's getting it anyway. Well, as I explained to you, what we always tend to do is take people on a journey from their last year in school. And I'm sort of wondering, were you one of these academics or really had life something else for you?
Definitely not an academic.
Right.
Definitely. I enjoyed school. I always enjoyed school. Didn't do fantastically well academically because I didn't feel I needed to.
Right.
Struggle a bit with maths. But anyway, I was the sporting type in school.
Right.
Had a lot of athletics titles, county and Munster and some Ireland stuff as well. So
very good, very good. So anyway, I'm afraid in those days, athletics possibly wasn't going to bring a living in. So
no,
you were going to have to do something for a job. So
yeah,
what did you got in mind?
Well, when I was growing up, I always had a huge interest in mechanical things.
Right.
And I was the guy who took the bicycle apart and took the mother's clock apart. And if she said there was something wrong with the washing machine, I would just take it apart straight away and find what was wrong and sort it out. So I always felt that I was going to end up doing something in sort of mechanical engineering.
Right.
So when I left school, I had a brief internship in a shipping company, just for a few weeks, and then I joined a local marine engineering company, Murphy Engineers.
Well, that's fantastic because you have both sides of something that a lot of us, I'm afraid to be sexist here, men like to do, and let's take things apart. But unfortunately, most of us can't put them back together again. So you obviously had that skill set in the bag.
The important thing is that you're not left with extra bits and pieces when you're finished.
Oh, many a time I have, unfortunately, much to my frustration and everybody else's. So anyway, you got involved in marine engineering. Okay, that's quite interesting. And that's the heavy side of engineering, I would imagine.
Yeah, of course, everything was big. So we worked on ships in Watford, had a very busy port at the time. So we did work on ships, and I still have photographs of, I don't know if this makes sense to people, but people are familiar with a piston in an engine, and they're generally sort of the size of a coffee mug.
Yes.
The pistons that we worked on, the guys could fit down inside in the cylinder and sit on top of the piston. So
my goodness,
it's a bit different. The company also had an engineering services division or sales division where they sold a lot of engineering products into local companies or companies around the country, really. So when I started off as stock control in the company, but because I was handling the products all the time, I had a lot of interest in what I was handling and want to know more about it and how it was applied in industry and what it was used for, etc. So I spent a lot of time learning the product.
So not alone you were somebody who could actually understand what was written on the instructions and the makeup of these things, but had an interest to do so as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did that for about 2 years. I started off with the stock control, and then I got into trade counter sales.
Right.
And people would come in and I was able to recommend what they needed for different jobs and whatever. So when I got to the age of 20, I persuaded my boss to get me a company car, give me 100 quid to buy 100 quid float, money for a suit, and got handed a plastic briefcase and said, off to Kerry with you and see what you do. So
it sounds like an interesting challenge, but before we get to that, there was an interesting story between a Rolls Royce and a Scale Electric. I remember you telling me. I'd like to know a bit more about, and I think our listeners would be fascinated with.
Yeah, well, when I was about 18 or 19, my dad worked for Walford Stanley, the cooker company, and his European boss, we'll call him, was over visiting, and he asked if we could. My dad went for dinner with them, and Morris Buckley was the gentleman's name, just happened to drive a Rolls Royce, a new Rolls Royce.
Oh, nice one, yeah.
He dropped my dad back after dinner, and one of the windows was stuck in the car. So he said, look, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. He was on street parking that night. So my dad bravely ventured that I might have a look at it.
Right.
So
Okay.
I got out some spanners and screwdrivers, and I took the panel off the door in a Rolls Royce. I got the power supply from Scale Electric set and put the power onto the motor to drive it back up again. So at that, Morris said, like, do you drive? I said, yeah, I have a full driving license. He said, would you drive me back to the hotel? He said, I don't want to leave the car on the street overnight. And he said, maybe you could take the car away with you. So 18, 19 years of age, an offer of a Rolls Royce for the night. Yeah, I accepted.
I did. And, so, I presume he got it back intact in the morning.
He did, yeah. I was amazed how much power was in a Rolls Royce as well.
I'd say you were. And the fact that I'd say they'd be horrified back in the Rolls Royce plant to think that a Scale Electric piece of electrics was running their windows.
Yeah, it was an experience.
Yeah, but it just shows you the mindset. Okay, so there's a creative mindset to solving problems, which was obviously to stand to you in later life. So anyway, you, as you said, you got involved in your next stage of your career.
Mm-hmm. When I was working with Murphy's, like I said, I was on the road when I was 20 as a salesman, and after probably 6 years in the company, I developed an interest in the pneumatics game, which is basically the automation that's in every factory. There's no factory that doesn't run on compressed air. It's a given. So we had a debate about whether I was allowed to do pneumatics in the company or not. And my boss said no. And the guy who owned the company said, absolutely yes. If you have an interest, you're welcome. You can do it. So I did some courses in the pneumatics game with different manufacturers. And then we went, I kind of got into the pneumatics game more and more. And within a few years of that, an opportunity came up to join a specialist pneumatics manufacturing company based in City West. We were in Ballymount at the time, but it was a Japanese company.
Based in City West.
Right. Yeah, so SMC Pneumatics. So I
and
joined
what attracted you to the world of pneumatics, if you don't mind me asking?
It's all to do with circuitry and making things work. So there was a real challenge in it. People would come to you and say, look, I need to lift this load and I need to position it and I need to rotate it. We'll just say if you're in a brewery, you have kegs of beer coming down the line, they need to be inverted, they're washed. They're all handled by pneumatics. You put in an empty keg at the start, it comes out cleaned, washed, filled, capped at the far side, and everything in there is pneumatics.
And pneumatics as a sort of technology has been around a long time.
Oh, an awful long time, yeah. But when you get into today's manufacturing world, you have high-speed automation. So a lot of, like our customers would say, the likes of Bosch and Lomb, the contact lens manufacturing, you could have, you could be making 200,000 parts a day.
Wow.
So there's very high cycling and high speeds. And because of that, then it brings in a lot of safety into it. So we got involved in the safety side of things with light curtains and safety switches to protect workers from injury. Initially, when we started with the electronic side of things, like that was all new. But because I have an interest in things that work, I just got to learn by myself. The funny thing about it was when I was in school, I hated maths.
Right.
And because I was useless. So when I joined that company, I actually went into the book centre in Waterford and I bought Leaving Cert physics books and maths books. And I decided I would teach myself all the things that I missed out on when I was in school. So I did, yeah. So that was very interesting.
But isn't it interesting that it took something that you had a particular interest in, that as a byproduct had something like maths as a given, but also it would have been very specific maths you would have been involved in it, as opposed to the diverse range of maths that we get taught in school.
Yeah, I remember I was in a factory one day and a guy asked me to calculate the force that he could achieve from a certain size cylinder at a certain pressure. And I looked at him and I went, can I come back to you on that one? So I went off and I probably did the calculation 150 times over until I could do it in my head. Right. So when I went back into him again, I was well able to answer the question.
Yeah.
But like I say, I firmly believe you must know what you're talking about when you're talking about a product that's in factory automation, you can't take chances on recommendations of products. You have to know. Guessing is not good.
Yeah, and I mean, it comes down to specialized knowledge, and we'll come back to that in a minute, because I was interested with this. We were talking about the Japanese company, and you got the opportunity then to travel to Japan to see the world in a completely new light in every sense of it. Tell us more about that experience.
It was brilliant. It got off to a very good start when they bought us first class tickets out to Japan.
Oh, wow. That's a good start. All right.
Yeah, I think it was in the mid 90s, and the tickets were probably 5,500 each at the time.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Something.
I know I made it up that if we had gone economy, we probably could have brought 4 staff over for the price of my ticket.
Wow.
But because of the different time zones and the travel, what happened was we could actually sleep on the plane on the way over. So when we got into Tokyo, into Narita, we had idiot cards that we would give out to the taxi driver, and basically where I need to go, when I need to be there, and how much I'm going to pay you for the journey. So the Japanese were making sure that we didn't get ripped off. But yeah, Japan was very interesting. Very little English spoken out there, apart from in the factory environments. So we had a number of manufacturing sites around Japan, and I got to visit 3 or 4 different sites, which was brilliant.
And really what were the main sort of differentials between manufacturing in Japan as opposed to maybe this side of the pond?
I suppose the main thing is the Japanese are so regimented. Every factory you went into, from the owner of the company down to the lowest individual, everybody wore the same uniform.
Right.
A sort of a working jacket, that sort of thing. The cleanliness in the factories, the efficiency in the factories, the setup, the manufacturing in a line. So basically, raw materials come in at one end, and there's no building up 50 parts to a certain degree, and then we'll give them over to Johnny on the far side. Everything just continued in a straight line until it was finished at the end.
So they had sort of planned processes that worked much more efficiently than sort of ad hoc ones that we tend to see in plants here.
Yeah, I think plants in Ireland have become a lot more streamlined, and they're better at the straight line process, but there's still a certain amount of, we manufacture to a certain degree, and then it's sort of part packaged, and it goes to a different area in the factory for the final packaging and testing and that sort of thing. But we're definitely much improved on where we used to be.
Right. And you're also talking about cleanliness. For me, I've always thought, I remember a mechanic who had his own garage specialized in Aston Martin, but you could eat off the floor in his garage. And it occurred to me it was very much a sense of a way of doing things and a discipline. And you mentioned something as well about the cleanliness of the factories.
Yeah, with the foundry in particular, where they cast the aluminium parts. I was used to dealing with Waterford Iron Foundry, as I mentioned earlier. And in Waterford Iron Foundry, it was like going back into the 1600s. Every bit of glass in the place was covered in dust, which had adhered to it. It was just burned in. And the floor was covered in sand from the casting process, and there was dust and burnt bits of stuff everywhere. When we went to the foundry in Japan, it was like walking into a hospital.
Wow.
You could actually, without hesitation, you could eat your dinner off the floor in a foundry. I was just amazed by the whole thing out there.
And can you tell me this in terms of mindset? What difference you think it made having a factory to that level of cleanliness as opposed to what was back here in the workers' eyes, maybe?
Well, it's back to efficiencies again, and good working environment for the workers in the factory. Like to be in a place where you had a clean uniform. I mean, the lads in the foundry in Waterford did great work over the years, but when I think back to the conditions that they worked in, like, it was crazy. It was literally like something from Dickens.
All right. Yeah, and of course, health and safety and things that are involved there to the day and age. Yeah. So, okay, you have a great interest in pneumatics and one thing and another. So what are you going to do with that skill set?
I suppose I got to 30 years of age and I decided it was time for a move again. So I was approached by an Irish pneumatics company called Irish Pneumatic Services. and they offered me a directorship to move to
Right.
them. So I did. The big difference when I went to Irish Pneumatics was with the Japanese company, you just sell your own product. You don't see anybody else's product. Now I was working for a company who distributed for several different manufacturers. Excuse me. So that gave me an insight into different branches of the business, like the air compressors, like
Right.
um, ionizers, lots and lots of different products. So I got to meet a lot of suppliers from overseas, from different countries. So basically I made connections to a point where I decided I really should be doing this for myself.
All right. And it seemed to be an opportune conversation you had on a flight somewhere that prompted that whole thing, which was sort of, what did they say, serendipitous.
Serendipity.
Yeah.
I was on a flight to the UK with a guy who was the engineering manager and more for Crystal, Johnny O'Leary, a gentleman, absolute gentleman, and very good engineer. And during the flight, I was trying to plug up the courage to say to Johnny, how would it work out if I was to come in representing myself rather than the company I'm with? And just as I was about to bring it up, he turned around to me and said, Hilary, did you ever think of opening up on your own? So I said, well, funny enough, I was just going to have that conversation with you. We were on our way to the UK to see an air compressor. And Johnny said to me, he said, look, he said, I'm going to do a deal with you for the compressor. When you set up, I'll have you into the factory. And once you have certain things in place, you'll be able to do business with us. So you need proper accounting system, you need the visa processing system, all that sort of stuff. And he finished off by saying, well, look, we've just arrived in Birmingham. The motor show's on. So why don't we go to the motor show and I'll just buy the compressor?
Oh, I love that. So, and the motor show is great in Birmingham too. I love it.
Yeah. So we went to the motor show and came home that night and everything was set up.
Yeah. And that's a great sort of leg up. Obviously he had faith in your ability around your knowledge of the products. So therefore, yeah, it was great to get that sort of boost of morale as well.
It is. Yeah, it was great.
But nothing's given to you, as you well know. So you were going to have to work hard to sort of build that relationship.
And I actually appreciated that. I think I would have been disappointed if he turned around and said, yeah, look, we look after you and whatever. But the fact that he put it to me that I needed to have things in the right places. He knew I could do the job I was doing, that I did a lot of project work with the engineers in there on efficiencies and, better production. So yeah, he had the confidence in me, and I was quite happy that he said it's not a matter of just walking in the door. You do have to have things right. I think it puts you on a good footing. It's a bit like the enterprise board. When you go to set up a company, the enterprise board, you can kind of scoff at this stuff they ask you to do, but in essence, they put you through a start your own business course, even though you may already be started, but it does kind of formalize things in your head.
It puts discipline on it.
Yeah, absolutely does, yeah.
I'm always saying to people, there are two sides of business. One is the knowledge and expertise that you sell, and the other side of it is running a business. And that's the bit so many people are missing, as you well know.
Two totally different things. So many people that I've known over the years who were salespeople thought, yeah, I can just start up tomorrow and that'll be fine. But I've seen people flounder left, right, and center because they don't have the business acumen for it.
And what did you find? I mean, I know you used the local enterprise offices and things like that, but you obviously took a keen interest in understanding what it takes to run a business, because that's the important part of it.
Yeah, absolutely did. Yeah. Obviously went and got an accountant to start off with. And a funny thing, I was in the BMW garage looking to buy a second-hand car, and an ex-neighbour of mine walked in looking to buy a key for his BMW. Right. And he said, how are you? I said, I'm just starting up my own business. And he said, I just started my own business. He said, I'm an accountant. I said, right, you're my accountant from here on out.
Wow.
So it's funny the way things happen.
Yeah, and it's also about the power of networking as well, which we tend to underestimate in business. As you said, that the fact that you had that conversation and also recognize the necessity of having somebody who has a skill set that's outside of your own.
Yeah. it's really important to get things right at the start. Like we got our software, business software, in pretty quickly, and we had been doing transactions on Excel and probably in Word documents, but to get a proper accounting package in, was helped out by the enterprise board on the purchase of that and the setup of it, etc. So, like I said, they do give you good grounding, and they're good for advice.
Right.
They're good for a few quid for grants.
Yeah. So all the things that we need to get set up.
Yeah.
But one of the things that certainly would have stood to your benefit was seeing what happened in Japan and the importance of processes and running that sort of linear system.
Oh, it does, yeah. Working for a multinational company, especially a Japanese company, you see the formal processes that are needed to run a business properly. So I had the experience of an Indigenous Irish company, family run, and I also had the experience of a multinational company run by Japanese, which was completely different. But you do learn certain processes, budgeting, etc. Like when we did budgeting for the Japanese, it was a case of if you got it wrong, when you submit your figures, the figures come in from all countries around the world. And if your budget is way out, it means that the Japanese will produce way too much product. If you underestimate, which typically Irish people, I think, tend to underestimate, so they look good when the figures come in better than what I estimated. But the Japanese didn't appreciate that at all. Their attitude was, you can be up or down within a certain band, but don't be well under and don't be well over. They're equally bad.
Yeah, so they want a realistic understanding of what is required in dealing with that. No, it's a fascinating stuff. In terms of yourself, I know you're kind of process driven as well. You've carried that with you for your own business. How's that worked for you? Because I mean, I understand you kind of started from a filing cabinet and worked your way up.
Yeah, our first stores was a three drawer cabinet. It was actually a sock drawer cabinet from Argos. And we progressed then on to a 6 meter shed, which we shelved out. But when we shelved it out, we put in locations, and we put the locations then into software. So we could actually have locations set up in the computer. So when we went to pick an order for a customer, the computer actually gave us location straight away. So we went from a 3 drawer sock cupboard to like a proper system, even if it was held in a wooden shed.
Yeah. It's interesting, the mindset around that. I mean, I think some of our listeners who are in business are probably thinking, oh, hang on a second, that's a bit, heavy, that where the location of everything is. Just explain that to people, the importance of that in terms of running an efficient business.
Yeah, well, if you've got a couple of hundred lines of product, a couple of hundred items, there's a chance you might know sort of where things are located in your stores. But like we've over 27,000 lines.
Wow.
So it's vitally important that the stock system is correct. And when we put an order on our system, we print a pick slip for it. And the pick slip tells the guys in the warehouse exactly where they need to go in the stores to pick that. So it obviously saves an awful lot of time. And then we put in a kind of a belt and braces system. So I changed the software a little bit so that when the guys go out to pick, say 5 parts from a bin, I also managed to include what the stock system said should be in the bin.
All right.
So he goes to pick 5, and beside the 5, it says you should have 200 in stock. And he looks and he said, well, there's about 50. So obviously there's a problem. So that little addition in the software actually brings up a checking system, stock check system.
Yeah, stock control, stock system.
Yeah, again, I started off in stock control. So as I said, a long way back, I understand the importance of having to have things right. And when you do a stock take every year, obviously you need to put in any changes into the system to identify any over or unders and get your stock right, even from a valuation point of view for your accounts.
Yeah. So again, a system like this, so really when you're doing stock control, it's more a verification of what you already have in the system, as opposed to having to count it out and then somebody else having to count it to verify what that they said. So if, again, from a productivity point of view, it's very efficient.
Yeah, it is.
And again, I'm often wondering why so few people get involved in putting proper systems in and buying the software to do it.
I think people don't want to invest money in systems, but in the long run, you save money by having good systems in place. Like we've written operation procedures for every procedure we have in the company. That goes from how you deal with a statement when it arrives in, allocating goods. We've a cross-check. When the products are counted into an order for a customer, that has to be cross-checked by a different person to make sure that it is what we said is in the box and that the correct quantity is in it. But we've brought that as far as a lock-up procedure at Christmas. So when we shut for Christmas, we leave a few quid in the till for the burglars so they don't wreck the place. The heating has to be changed, voice messages on the phones, out of office on the computers. So once you have these things set up, it's easy to follow.
Yeah, and I'm a great believer in that as well. I'm delighted to hear that from you, because so many people go, Asher, we'll remember that.
Yeah, but you don't.
No, you don't when you have so much of it.
Yeah.
You know, and there's huge cost benefits in doing these things.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we spoke before about, we have a process. We sell an awful lot of compressors.
Right.
And we have a process here. We've got about a 14-item checklist. So each compressor is checked before it leaves the factory to come to us. When it gets here, we recheck everything ourselves. The benefit of that is if there's an issue with the compressor, we deal with it on the spot in our own premises, not in a customer's premises that might be 50 or 60 kilometers away, and where it's costly to actually go there and sort out the issue. So it probably takes 4 minutes to do a full check. So in the long run, it saves an awful lot of money by having that check done.
Yeah. So, and it's just part of your standard operational procedures.
Exactly. Yeah.
For our listeners there who'd like to know more about your business, and where can they find out more details about that?
Well, we're on the web, www.airpower.ie, and that's AIR because of aircom. People generally put in EIR.
Yes.
So airpower.ie. We do sell from our site. I suppose the compressor business since the pandemic came in, the compressor business has been huge for us.
Right.
We look after a lot of dairies where they have the robotic milking machines. We look after a lot of industrial premises. We've done a lot of installations with dentists in the last year. The dentists have to have a different type of compressor, very high clean, obviously, compressor. So that would be a very large part of our business at the moment. But if people go onto our website, they can see all the different products we have there, from engineering supplies to pneumatic products to pipe work to compressors. We do everything in a factory from start to finish. We start with your air compressor, we have your pipe work, we have your drops to your machines, we have the parts for your machines. We can give advice on improvements on your machines. We can do the electronic safety on your machine. So we are start to finish, A to Z.
Right. That's fantastic. And 20 years in business, so at least you know what you're doing at this stage of your life.
I hope so anyway.
It's great
the fact that we're still here, Alex, it has to say something anyway.
Well, I mean, I must say, as I wrap up, it's a credit to you, not alone that you've taken on the challenge of COVID, but you're dealing with Brexit. But I won't drag you into that conversation. We could be here for
sore point.
So let me just finish up by saying airpower.ie for most people who want to know anything about that.
Yeah.
And all I can say is, Hilary, what a fantastic opportunity to chat to you, and thanks very much indeed.